It's WNYC. Coming up in just a moment, it's Marketplace. On the show tonight, it's been 8 years since the start of the trade war between the U.S. and China, and the old trade rules may not make sense in today's global economy.
We can't wish that we were in that perfect world. We've got to be pragmatic, and maybe the best we can do is manage the fallout.
A global economy where trade wars are the new normal. That's coming up on Marketplace in just a moment. We'll be back with all things considered at 7. It's 60 degrees, cloudy out, rain is possible tonight, lows in the mid-50s. It's WNYC at 6:30.
WNYC is a media partner of the Public Theater's Free Shakespeare in the Park, presenting The Winter's Tale, directed by Daniel Sullivan, at the Delacorte Theater. Begins July 25th, open to all. More at publictheater.org.
If you believe democracy requires a free press, your station is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Marketplace is supported by BMC. BMC helps customers automate, manage, and optimize their complex IT environments. Learn more at bmc.com.
To infinity and beyond. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Schwab. With the Schwab Teen Investor account, teens can gain hands-on investing experience. It's co-owned by parents and teens, so parents can monitor the account while teens learn how to invest and manage money. More at schwab.com. And by GEP. As companies navigate global supply chain challenges, GEP works to help businesses optimize value and reduce risk through procurement and supply chain strategy consulting services and its AI-native platform, GEP Quantum Intelligence. And by 3-Day Blinds. With more than 45 years designing, manufacturing, and installing custom window treatments in a range of styles, like motorized treatments for home automation. Online bookings and consultations at 3dayblinds.com.
In Los Angeles, I'm Kai Ryssdal. It is Thursday today. This one is the 21st of May. Good as always to have you along, everybody. I am just going to read from the SpaceX S-1 that came out last night. That's the first form that companies have to file with the Securities and Exchange Commission to start the process of going public. Our mission, it says, is to build the systems and technologies necessary to make life multiplanetary, to understand the true nature of the universe, and to extend the light of consciousness to the stars. So Elon Musk and the gang are taking a big swing indeed. This is the first look under the financial hood of the rocket company, which also owns the social media platform X, as well as XAI. It's coming before its expected IPO next month, which could wind up with a $1.75 trillion with a T dollar valuation. This is the first in a string of mega IPOs that are lined up. OpenAI as soon as this fall, perhaps Anthropic after that. Point is, this hasn't happened before. Companies hitting the public markets for the first time with such enormous valuations. Marketplace's Megan McCarty-Carino starts us off.
When the web browser Netscape went public in 1995, it was barely a year old.
At 11 a.m. this morning, the company's stock went public and Wall Street went bonkers.
That kicked off the dot-com boom, says Jay Ritter, an economist at the University of Florida.
There were lots of startups that went public at a very early stage where it wasn't at all clear who the survivors were going to be.
That created a risk for retail investors, but also opportunity to get in on the ground floor of tech companies that would build unimaginable fortunes, like Google and Amazon.
In the last few decades, they've been delaying going public.
SpaceX is 24 years old. OpenAI is 10. Anthropic is only 5, but all have mature businesses generating billions in revenue. It means gains have accrued to a smaller group of private investors and venture capital firms, and that important details about these companies' business models have been less transparent, says Minmo Gang, a professor of finance at Cornell.
Once you go public, companies can no longer cherry pick what pieces of information they want to disclose.
While these companies have booming revenue, Gang says they're not likely to be profitable in the near future because they're spending so much on hardware. But there's a lot of pent-up demand to invest in the technology people are increasingly using every day, says analyst Daniel Newman at Futurum Group.
These are companies that could legitimately take almost all of the market's liquidity for a short period of time, because there's going to be so many funds, institutions, and retail investors that are all going to want to participate and all be part of this.
A lot of individual investors have already been trying to scoop up shares ahead of the IPO on the secondary market, not always through official means. One investment banker offered his Bay Area home for sale in exchange for Anthropic shares. I'm Megan McCarty-Carino for Marketplace.
Wow, that is a big swing indeed. Wall Street today, stocks up, oil down. Stop me if you've heard that one before. We will have the details when we do the numbers. The average price of a new car in this economy at the moment sits right around $50,000. So the news from Stellantis this morning was interesting market share-wise. The global car maker with more than a dozen brands, Fiat, Peugeot, Jeep, Dodge, and Chrysler among them, says it's going to introduce 9 new models that'll sell for less than $40,000. Daniel Ackerman has more now on cheaper new cars.
A little history lesson from auto analyst Glenn Mercer.
If I go back to, say, 1965 or 75, car quality was poor.
Which means there was a strong incentive to buy new cars.
A used car was a lemon, a junker was about to explode.
So automakers offered new cars at every price point. But Mercer says car quality has improved so much that customers who want something affordable can now safely buy used higher-end models.
So the entry-level competition is no longer Corolla versus Versa. It's Corolla versus a used Camry. Why wouldn't I buy the bigger car in pretty much equivalent shape for the same amount of money?
And so some automakers have abandoned their most affordable models altogether, says David Whiston, an auto analyst with Morningstar.
There's a lot more profit in selling a Highlander than there is a Corolla.
And there's been more demand for that Highlander too, says Aaron Keating of Cox Automotive.
We do continue to see a consumer that is looking for the larger, more technologically advanced vehicles.
But major price increases on those big new SUVs are starting to push some consumers to the brink, says Tyson Jominy of JD Power. Plus, automakers are eyeing the possibility of lower-cost competitors hitting the market.
They're thinking, what happens if Chinese automakers enter the U.S.? What happens if a lot of the competitors build plants in the U.S. and can start avoiding tariffs or, future tariffs or whatever it is?
Jominy says Stellantis may want to acquaint American consumers with its affordable models before any of that happens. I'm Daniel Ackerman for Marketplace.
We're going to talk about trade quite a bit in the second half of the program. Big picture trade war kind of stuff. But the reality is all that big picture stuff is made up of a whole lot of more granular stuff, which for us right now is element number 74 on the periodic table, tungsten. It's a metal that's critical to all kinds of industries, especially manufacturers that need to cut other kinds of metal. Most of the tungsten used here comes from China, which controls, give or take, 80% of the world's supply. And the trade discontent between the two countries has sent tungsten prices up 300% over the past year or so. That's according to the CRU group. As Marketplace Justin Ho reports, though, that tungsten inflation has less to do with tariffs than it does with another weapon in the global trade war, export controls.
A big reason why tungsten is unique is that it has a very high resistance to heat.
And so that makes it ideal for handling the temperatures required to melt other metals without it melting itself.
That's Chris Blench, CEO of Mavericks Manufacturing Partners, a company near San Diego that makes components for the energy and defense sectors. Blench says tungsten's commonly used as the electrode when welding parts for those sectors.
All of our aircraft, missile systems, nuclear, right? So the nuclear power plants for submarines and aircraft carriers, they'll use a lot of this particular kind of a process using tungsten.
About once a month, Mavericks Manufacturing Partners will order a 10-pack of tungsten electrodes, which are the thin rods that go into welding tools. But last fall, the company noticed that prices were starting to rise. So Joe Thompson, the company's chief operating officer, loaded up on a year's supply.
Because at that time, it wasn't really a huge cost, right? But we can stock it.
Thompson says that ended up being the right call. Prices of those 10-packs have more than tripled in the time since, in part because there's a lot of demand from the defense sector. Tungsten's used to make torpedoes and armor-piercing ammunition. Nicolas Anesi with CRU Group says that's partly because of the Iran war and because Europe's spending more on defense.
If we look at the particular example of Germany, we see that Germany is reconverting part of the manufacturing operations into military projects.
But the reason why prices have skyrocketed this year also has to do with supply, since China controls so much of the market.
China has implemented export restrictions, meaning that only those who get a license can actually sell tungsten overseas.
China's trying to hang on to its tungsten, along with other critical metals, to safeguard its own interests, says Leah Fahy, senior China economist with Capital Economics.
But equally, the other key thing is that it's being used as a bargaining tool in a way of kind of causing pain to the US and the US's allies.
That's partly because of the Trump and Biden administration's tariff policies, but it's also because the U.S. has been using its own export controls on China.
One of the key things that the U.S. has been doing to restrict China in recent years is restricting China's access to U.S. semiconductors and the products used to make those semiconductors.
There are efforts in the U.S. and elsewhere to find more sources of tungsten. But Damien Ma, with the think tank Carnegie China, says that mines are a risky proposition that would require more than the private sector.
This is why China has succeeded, is that they've applied basically economy-wide industrial policy to get these strategic metals, because the markets were not really going to be investing in these areas.
The U.S. has awarded money to companies to study the possibility of domestic tungsten mining, but any new source would be at least years away. And until then, companies are beholden to whatever China decides to do.
I think the world's waking up to the fact that if any one country controls a commodity, it's a high risk for the whole world.
That's Brendan Moore, co-owner of Wolftooth Components, a company near Minneapolis that makes bike parts. It uses tungsten tools to whittle down blocks of aluminum into pedals, gears, and other components. Moore says the company spends a few $1,000s a month on these tools, and over the past year, prices have nearly doubled.
A few $1,000s isn't life-changing for a machine shop the size of ours, but it's significant enough that you see it in the numbers.
Moore says the company can resharpen the tools so they last longer. But beyond that, there's not much else he can do.
It's just another one of those things where, like aluminum prices going up or anything else, electricity going up, we largely just have to eat it in the short term.
Moore says he really doesn't want to pass the cost on to his customers. But if tungsten stays expensive, he might have to. I'm Justin Ho for Marketplace.
Well, let's see. We've talked about spaceships with SpaceX, cars too with Stellantis. Now, how about boats? Fishing boats in particular, in the, say, 20 to 30-foot range. Here's today's installment of our series, My Economy.
My name is Matjash Kreidler. I'm the owner and operator of a small-scale fishing company on Oahu, Hawaii. I'm still somewhat in the transition to it. I started about 5-6 years ago, going out for fun on the weekends. I was in the Army for about 8 years, and then I got out of that in 2019, and I was teaching middle school. Last year, I moved more toward full-time fishing. Originally, the goal was just to cover expenses and then make a little bit of money. And then last year, I was trying to at least pay for the mortgage. And then my wife is a teacher. She pays for the rest right now. Right now is the very beginning of ahi season. A lot of what I catch I sell to local families. Sometimes when I have more than I can unload myself, I take it to the auction block over in Honolulu. There are lots of other fishermen who go out and try to make a living by fishing commercially. A lot of them have other jobs too, contractors, or they'll do construction or kind of whatever work they can to supplement fishing, because as fun as it is and as good as it can be, lots of times when the fish are biting good, then everybody's catching, which pushes the price down. And then other times there's not much biting, and you have to put a lot of time and a lot of resources into just getting a few. I've gotten a master's in diplomacy and military studies and in cybersecurity, but I don't really want to do either of those things after having studied them. Being able to sell your catch is super satisfying. I don't know if I'll ever get to the point where I'll be able to make a full living off of it, and definitely won't ever get rich doing it, but as long as I can get by doing something that I love, that's kind of all I need.
There you go, right? Maches Kreidler, fishing for a living in Oahu, in Hawaii. This series only works with your stories, so share them with us if you like. Marketplace.org is where you can do that. Coming up,
we have to fight a trade war. You're not allowed to say, I don't want to play in this game.
So how do you win? First, though, let's do the numbers. Dow Industrial's up 276 today, 0.6%, 50,285. The NASDAQ added 22 points, 0.1%, 26,293. The S&P 500 gained 12 points, 0.2%, 74 and 45. The federal government is going to be investing $2 billion in companies developing quantum computing. The money is coming from the CHIPS Act, signed by President Biden. International Business Machines will get $1 billion investment for new quantum venture. IBM accumulated 12.4% on the day. Chipmaker Global Foundries gets roughly a third of that. It added almost 15% today. Deere & Company reported its second quarter profits were down thanks to sluggish demand for heavy farm equipment. We talked about the farm economy the other day. Deere down 5.2%. You're listening to Marketplace.
The Numbers is supported by Odoo.com, your entire business on one platform. Marketplace is supported by Viking, dedicated to bringing travelers closer to the destination. Viking offers a small ship experience with no children and no casinos. Discover more at Viking.com. And by Progressive Insurance. On the road and at home, customers can simplify their insurance needs and protect what's important by bundling home and auto with Progressive Insurance. Learn more about Progressive and bundling at Progressive.com. And by Wealth Enhancement, offering a wealth blueprint for individuals reviewing an existing financial plan. Advisors identify planning gaps and insights as part of comprehensive financial planning. More at wealthenhancement.com/blueprint.
Stephen Colbert hosts The Late Show one last time. Fellow late-night hosts The Jimmys, Kimmel and Fallon, will air reruns to give Colbert the spotlight. Join us for a review of the finale from critic-at-large Eric Deggans and fan reactions as one of the highest-rated American late-night talk shows comes to an end on the next morning edition from NPR News.
Weekday mornings on WNYC.
WNYC is supported by Columbia University School of Professional Studies. Upskill for the changing workplace with flexible master's programs. Application deadline, June 1st. More at sps.columbia.edu/upskill.
You're listening to Marketplace on WNYC. Coming up in the 7 o'clock hour of All Things Considered, 2 police officers who helped defend the U.S. Capitol during the January 6th riot are suing to block anyone from receiving payouts from a new settlement fund. We're going to hear all about that and much more at 7. Stay tuned.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Ryssdal. It's a week now since President Trump's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The results of those talks were honestly a little vague, but more talks do seem to be in the offing. As of right now, we have been in a trade war with China for 8 years, and we cover it a lot. Today, though, we're going to do trade policy writ large, and we're going to do it by talking about a book by Soumaya Keynes. She's a columnist at the Financial Times, and Chad Bown. He's a senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. And their book is called How to Win a Trade War, an Optimistic Guide to an Anxious Global Economy. Welcome to the program. It's good to have you on.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Would one of you please, just so we all have the same definition here, tell me what a trade war is?
Yeah, well, that's a big question. I think most people think of trade wars as Trump style tariff attacks. And what we are saying is that trade wars are much broader than that, right? So trade wars involve parties weaponizing trade flows, using trade to coerce other actors, make others do what they want. It's a scary world out there.
I was told, Chad Bound, that one cannot win a trade war, and yet here you and Soumaya are having written a whole book about it. Help me out here.
Well, I was actually one of the people who used to say such a thing.
I think you said it to me on this program, actually.
I think I have, but that was the old world, and unfortunately, we're in a new world now where we have to fight a trade war. You're not allowed to say, I don't want to play in this game, and given that, the way to win is to do the best that you can. Sometimes that's to minimize your wounds, but we think there's actually more opportunities there than that you can actually do better if you actually learn how to fight.
Well, go on, one of you, because we all know that trade wars are not great and it's not going great.
Yeah, so there are essentially two big trade wars happening right now, right? You've got the trade war that President Trump started on everyone. But then you've also got the slower burn trade war that China is essentially fighting with the rest of the world. And this is essentially what Trump is distracting from, right? By fighting trade wars with everyone else, he's distracting from that big problem. So step one of winning a trade war is identify the right trade war. But also logistics win real wars, right? And so winning a trade war means doing the prep. Means identifying where you're weak, identifying where you're strong, considering all the weaponry, so stockpiling, giving companies handouts in this world of economic conflict. We have to consider these weapons because that's the world we're in. Everyone else is fighting dirty, and so unfortunately, we've got to learn how to as well.
Chad, does it ever strike you, or does it ever occur to you how amazing it is that we're here? You're a guy who spent his whole life on trade and trade policy, right, in academia and in the government, and here you are now, literally in the middle of a trade war.
It really does. It's at some level a little bit surreal. We've thought so hard about how it is that you actually do need to use things like subsidies in industrial policy, stockpiling, and tariffs to get yourself out of these situations. It is a little bit weird to realize that, yeah, I'm now saying this, but it's the reality that we're now in. And China is really a big part of this story. And these are some of the tools that you have to figure out how to use effectively when you're going to engage with China in a trade war.
The thing is, though, Soumaya, so let's go back before Trump won, right? Before the original steel and aluminum tariffs in the previous 40-ish, maybe 80-ish years. It's not like global trade was great, but there were rules and there were things that people did and didn't do. And it kind of seems like they don't apply anymore, right?
Yeah, and I think that's for a couple of reasons, right? I mean, the obvious one is that President Trump is not a rule-abiding guy, right? It's not his personality type. But also, we've got China's system, and there are certain aspects of it that are just not really compatible with the rules that we have now. The rules of the trading system are supposed to constrain the way that governments give money to their companies, to give them handouts, to give them a competitive advantage. Now, the problem is that the way China gives out subsidies is incredibly opaque, incredibly hard to pin down. And so those old rules just didn't work. And for a while we tried, but we just have to accept the world we're in right now.
Chad, I don't want to go too deep on the great man theory of history, but you and Sumaya had a piece in the New York Times the other day about the recent summit between President Trump and President Xi. And you two basically, I'm paraphrasing, correct me if I'm wrong, this is never going to work with those two guys in charge, basically.
They're not seeking to get to a solution, I think, on this problem. And so what we argued is you probably do need to have a different approach between these two economies. And one of it is to recognize that, especially on the case of the Chinese side, they have built up so much market dominance in manufacturing sectors. We all know now these examples of rare earths and permanent magnets that U.S. companies are reliant on to be able to make things here at home, that you have to do something about that, right? You need to reduce those dependencies somehow. And right now, those two players really, they've got a short-term truce. We're not going to raise tariffs on you if you give us some of those rare earths and permanent magnets. But they haven't come to a resolution between themselves allowing us to reduce that dependency on the United States side. And what we would propose is a way to actually tackle that kind of problem, to prevent it from spilling up and escalating in a way that it did really last year, which was the root of some of the problems in the relationship between the two countries.
Just to jump on that, in an ideal situation, the U.S. would say, look, we are gonna borrow less money. We're gonna do policies at home that means that the trade deficit would fall. The Chinese would spend a bit more themselves. They would import a bit more. But for that to happen, both Trump and Xi would need to have personality transplants. I think was the line in the New York Times piece, right? It's not going to happen. And so, again, we can't wish that we were in that perfect world. We've got to be pragmatic. And maybe the best we can do is manage the fallout as these two, leaders or, countries really thinking about the longer term are trying to reduce their overdependencies on each other.
Okay, so look, not to quibble with the choice of the subtitle here. The book is called How to Win a Trade War, An Optimistic Guide to an Anxious Global Economy. When do we get to the optimistic part?
Yeah, this is my confession. Okay, so I think it is optimistic in that we're really not trying to throw up our hands and say, oh, isn't it all terrible? And, woe is me. There are things you can do. There are ways to fight a trade war better. Where we are a bit pessimistic is how long it's going to take to get to something stable, right? And that could take a really long time. If you look back at the 20th century, it took decades. It took the Second World War to persuade people that actually we need some kind of stable system. And, fingers crossed that we don't need that again.
Chad Bown, you get the last word. Decades and decades. That's a bit daunting.
It is, but again, I'm with Sumaya. We have to be optimistic about this. We do have a lot of lessons from economic evidence, from history, about how to manage the challenges that we are facing right now, how to do things better. And that's where some of the optimism comes from. Right now, I think we're in a place where we're not doing that well. We can do it better. Here's a guide to show us the way.
Chad Bown, Sumaya Keynes, their book is called How to Win a Trade War. Thanks, you two. Appreciate your time.
Thanks
for having us.
Marketplace is supported by Amazon Business. Amazon Business offers smart business buying, which uses AI-driven tools to perform time-consuming procurement tasks, helping to simplify complex processes and streamline workflows. Learn more at amazonbusiness.com. And by Revenued, providing working capital for businesses whose cash flow is holding them back. Revenued approves businesses based on revenue, not credit, and funds can be approved and available in just one day. Visit getrevenued.com.
All right, we got to go. Too much talking trade, not enough time for a final. Our daily production team includes Livy Burdett, Andy Corbin, Maria Hollenhorst, Sarah Leeson, Sean McHenry, Michaela Sea, and Sophia Terenzio. Will Story is the supervising senior producer, and I'm Kai Rizdal. We will see you tomorrow, everybody. This is 8 p.m.
WNYC is supported by Carnegie Hall, presenting Harry